All right. So, for those of you who are trying to watch me on YouTube, like, I apologize. I'm like a big computer nerd, so I do a lot of this stuff like on my own, and I have never had as many problems as I have with trying to do YouTube Live. So, we're just gonna do it here. And then what I'll do is I'll upload it to YouTube later. That's what I'll do. I think that's a pretty good idea, don't you? All right. So I apologize about that. Anyways, I'm gonna go over some stuff. I'll be here for the next hour or so until about 3:30, 3:30 Pacific time. But yeah, I wanted to kind of go over again why I'm starting this whole relaunch of YouTube, and I absolutely promise to each one of you out there that I will not do a YouTube live video again until I make sure that stuff works because it was not working. But anyways, the whole reason why I'm doing this on YouTube, so there's a few reasons. So one of the things is that mental health as a whole is a complicated topic. Okay, and on Facebook is meant for shorter videos. Not many people are going to go on Facebook and watch an hour-long video. So I have to dissect these things. I have to make these things very small on Facebook just so somebody even wants to watch it and maybe get a little information. My original video that blew up, it's had over 500,000 views now. Nobody would have paid it any attention if it was 7 or 8 minutes long. So the reason why I'm moving this stuff over to YouTube is for all of you out there who have questions, who want more information, who want to know the science, who want to know the facts, who want to know the news and what's going on in the world when it comes to mental health and addiction. I'm moving it over to YouTube so I can do longer videos for people like you. Then here on Facebook, I'll do shorter videos, or I might splice up the longer videos. But I want to talk about the news that's going on because there's everywhere in this country and even all over the world, there are issues with mental health, there's issues with addiction, and not many places are dedicated to talking about them. Some of the places that are, I feel, are not doing a good enough job because and unless I'm not following the right places, but some of them are out there and they're saying, okay, let's get you off alcohol by using weed, or let's get you off of, or let's help your depression by giving you some ketamine. And these are completely crazy ideas. So I want to be out there and like be a voice, and we could talk about these things and hopefully get kind of a more well-rounded view on, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? I also want to hear from all of you about what's going on in your areas so we could talk about it. So the people in the Ohio heroin epidemic can know about the people in Alabama who are dealing with a meth issue, or the people in Los Angeles who are dealing with a cocaine problem, or, here in Nevada, like, I got sober in Las Vegas, Nevada 5 years ago. When I was out there partying, like, there was three things. It was alcohol, it was pills, and it was cocaine. Now, meth is a huge problem. Heroin is becoming a bigger problem out here. So everything's constantly changing, and we need to all talk about this stuff and kind of work together on them. But the other thing is, too, there's a huge lack of education out there, and if you've scrolled through the comments on my original video, you see that very clearly. And that's another reason why I started the YouTube channel as well, because there's a lot of people in those comments who, not even in the comments, but they're messaging me too, and they said, there's a lot more than that, you idiot. Some dude today, he told me that I was a janitor and I might be a professional paint licker, and it was very, very funny. But everything that he said after that, I was like, yeah, exactly, I know. Like, I'm aware of these things, but it's hard to squeeze that into a 5-minute video. So if you're watching this, like, a lot of people who are probably watching this right now, you have questions about addiction, you have questions about you have questions about addiction or mental health, how the brain works, anything like that. Like, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for a lot of stuff, and I want to get more into that. So one of the videos that I'm going to do, and you're all getting a sneak preview of it right now, is when I look at all the hatred that's out there, when I see all the comments and the hate and the people who are saying, like, they made a choice, and you'll see, and what I had to realize a long time ago is that the people out there who have this hatred for addicts, a lot of them have been hurt by an addict. And it's important for me to understand that. And I try to learn. And I've had people who share their story with me and they tell me about losing a child or their husband and now they're raising their kids on their own. And I get that. Now, aside from the prefrontal cortex being responsible for logical decision making, and it's important that we talk about that. So, a lot of people don't understand this, and it's something that people need to get educated about. Your brain has many different components. So when people are sitting there arguing and saying it's not a disease, it's a choice, like that's like saying your car's not broken down, it's just leaking coolant. Like those are one and the same thing. There is a specific part of your brain that's responsible for making choices. There's a specific part of your brain that is responsible for telling you whether you should stay in a situation or you should run away, fight, flight, or freeze. So the prefrontal cortex is actually this part of the brain that separates us from the animals. We have a bigger prefrontal cortex than any other species out there, and it's what helps us stay at the top of the food chain. Now, one of the key responsibilities of the prefrontal cortex is empathy. Empathy is me actually caring about how you feel. Well, when we're looking at addiction as a disease and noticing that the prefrontal cortex isn't operating properly, and when people are saying there's no problem with their brain, no, there's a part of the brain that's responsible for empathy. That's why they don't care. The other issue is that the prefrontal cortex is responsible for something called fear modulation. Most of the people who die from addiction are those who say, I will never die from addiction. So it's kind of crazy to think that somebody picks up heroin and doesn't realize that it can kill them. You learn that from a young age, like whether you went through DARE or you watched TV or, you saw a movie, right? Like, we all know heroin can kill us. I was a prescription drug addict. Like, half of the celebrities who have died of substance abuse, probably more than half, it's been due to prescription drugs. Like, I knew that. But the part of my brain that's supposed to make me afraid of that happening is not working properly. So that's why people are willing to use until they die. And then if you combine that with the fact that addiction causes depression, so you have one part of your brain that makes you not afraid to die, then you have another part of your brain that doesn't give you the willingness to live. That is a very dangerous combination. I'll never forget, I had a client who passed away, and it really messed me up because I was pretty close to this client, and one of my friends said, maybe he wanted to die. And I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, like I know that in my addiction, like I wanted to die. I went to sleep at night hoping I didn't wake up in the morning. You know what I mean? So a lot of that does happen on a very, very regular basis. Oh yeah, we're actually getting some people joining the the video now. So yeah, share this. But I want people to ask questions. If you have questions about mental illness, a big thing is what I also try to explain too is that this is all connected, and something that some of you, if you haven't watched some of my other videos that I was making in the past, I talk about mental illness a lot. Now, the two leading causes of addiction are untreated or undiagnosed mental illness. So we really need to focus on the mental health aspect of it if we ever hope to deal with the addiction aspect of it. The other argument that's out there on these comments is that you made the choice to pick up that first drink or first drug. Well, absolutely. But when you are raised to not know anything about mental illness, self-medication is one of the only options that you know what to do. You hear about how alcohol can numb you or how drugs can numb you. That's the reason why. So mental illness, addiction, and suicide, they all go together. So I'm actually working on my second book. It's going to be a lot shorter, but talking about how we're going to break the stigma together, and part of it is just by educating people. I have an 8-year-old son. He's in the other room. He said he was going to watch this on the iPad. I don't know why he would. But anyways, I work with my son a lot on mindfulness and emotional regulation and noticing his thoughts and his feelings, because nobody was able to do that for me when I was a kid. I just thought that I was going nuts. I thought that I was going crazy. And I thought that the rest of the world was just able to deal with life better than I was. And, not only was that true, but there was actually a reason behind it. For any of you who got my email, and if any of you are watching this right now, listen to this. Okay, so I'll give you a little benefit for being here with me right now watching this video if you didn't get this coupon code. Coupon code is "it's free." I'll type it in the chat right now. It's free. One word. Go to the website, therewiredsoul.com. I have the whole entire course of understanding addiction, the disease of addiction, as well as how mindfulness helps you in your recovery. But one of the things that I talk about is that like pretty much anybody in this country has gone through a health class in wherever they're from. But a lot of us in our health class, all we did was talk about physical health. They talked about what foods to eat, how to get good exercise, and it would tell you about safe sex and STDs and diseases. I remember learning about cancer and AIDS, but when I started developing the symptoms of anxiety and depression, we never talked about that. If any of you are watching this right now, like, let me know, like, at your high school, like, did you learn about mental illness? Did you have sections of your course where they dove in deep and talked about what depression looks like, what PTSD looks like, what anxiety looks like? Because I'm always curious. I've had some clients who have told me that up in the Northeast where they're from, and there's a huge heroin epidemic up there too, is that they learn about mental illness in high school. And I almost wonder if that has something to do with it, because they're realizing that, okay, so there's a no there. And where are you from? But yeah, like, I wonder if these cities or these areas are starting to realize that mental illness is one of the reasons that leads to addiction. So in my course that I have up online, I talk about the different risk factors. Some of you watched my video where I talked about genetics being a risk factor. But mental illness is one of the leading causes of that. When our brain is not operating properly and we just want to feel something different, we're most likely going to turn to drugs and alcohol. So that's why we need to be talking about mental illness. No, you didn't talk about either. And sorry, I wrote down some notes over here too. So one of the other topics, one of the news pieces that I saw, and again, the reason why I'm switching this over to YouTube, so if you haven't subscribed over there yet, like, do it, because I'm going to start putting all my videos on YouTube, sharing them over here, so they'll be a little bit longer, and then people can decide if they want to watch them or not. But I want to talk about the news and the research when it comes to mental health and addiction. So one of the things that I was reading earlier was, according to the Journal of the American Board of Family Medicine, it said that 51% of the people who are being prescribed opioids are the ones who are being prescribed them because they have a mood disorder. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So the taboo, right? So one of the things is that when we're talking about how people with mood disorders are getting prescribed opioids, like, that's nuts. Like, mood disorder is over here. Opioids are meant to treat pain, which they don't even really do. They just block pain receptors and get you high. Like, why are people with mood disorders getting prescribed opioids? Like, fun fact, if you didn't know this yet, the United States, we prescribe 81% of the world's entire opioid supply every year. That is, like, I believe we prescribe more, like, we're at like 400 or 500% more than the next country who prescribes opioids, and that's part of the reason, is that we're prescribing it to people for no reason at all. But I do that what you touched on right there, talking about the taboo. Like, I have my old roommate. She became she was a first year high school teacher, and I'll never forget this because this is something that comes up a lot. She's a first year high school teacher, and I said, like, hey, if you ever want me to come down, maybe share my story, maybe talk about addiction or talk about mental health or anything like that, like, just let me know. I'd love to go down there, because I truly believe that we need to start teaching our kids about this, or the next generation. And she was telling me, like, basically the school district stance, and I see this from all over the country, is don't talk about it or they're going to want to do it. And that is absolutely nuts. So teenagers between the ages of 14 and 24 actually are naturally more curious. they're going to take more risks, and part of it is to not fully developed prefrontal cortex, right? So if we don't talk to them about it, who's talking to them about it? TV, movies, celebrities, right? So we need to discuss these things with our kids. Hell, my son is 8 years old, and I work at a rehab. He knows that I'm in recovery. He knows that I don't drink or use drugs. I haven't told him all the horror stories there is. Sorry, I was like checking to make sure he wasn't there. But I haven't told him all the horror stories, but he comes to the events that I do for work. He knows that I help people who do alcohol and drugs, but they can't stop. So me and him are already having this conversation. It's already kind of in his brain now. Trust me, I'm not one of those crazy parents who I am a little crazy, but I'm not sitting there telling him, or I don't even have the expectation that my son will never try a drink or a drug. But one of the best ways to prevent our children from drinking or abusing drugs is to let them know that the lines of communication are open. So a lot of kids, they have questions about those, but they're afraid that if they ask their parents, if they ask a teacher, if they ask a school counselor, they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble. So if we start training our children at a very young age that it's okay for them to talk to us about these things, then they're going to be more likely to say it, to talk about it when they get to that age when they want to go to their first party, or their friends are trying to encourage them to try something else. That's one of the best prevention methods, because studies have shown, and there's a whole bunch of studies out there, studies have shown that things like the DARE program don't work. Just telling kids not to do something, that doesn't work. One great study that they did, it was about smoking, it wasn't about drugs, was that they kept making all these different ads, right, to tell kids, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke. They started doing, I remember when I was a kid, they brought in human lungs that were donated, and they showed the difference between a good lung and a bad lung. Well, remember, the prefrontal cortex that doesn't fully develop until much later in life is responsible for fear modulation. So when you're showing a kid a tarred lung, and a kid can be anybody who's in high school, they can be 18, 19 years old, you show them a tarred lung, the kid's going to look at that lung that's filled with tar and say, okay, that's great, whatever. They think it's never going to happen to them. Now, they tried a new prevention method, and here's what they did, okay? And it was a bunch of neuroscientists who came up with this, and this is why I follow neuroscience, because they look at how the brain forms and functions and how it works. So these neuroscientists, they tried something new. What they did was they educated kids about the big, big, big tobacco companies and how much money they make. They explained to the kids and showed them that these tobacco companies know that kids are more likely to get hooked on cigarettes. They know that kids will smoke to be cool. And they know that if a kid starts smoking, they're more likely to become addicted to smoking, and they're going to smoke the rest of their life. So if they can get thousands of kids to do that, then these tobacco moguls, they're going to be making a ton of money for years. And what they saw was when they did that kind of presentation for teenagers, teens were much more likely to either A, never start smoking, or B, quit smoking. And the logic behind that is actually very smart. When you hit about around puberty area, between 12 and 14, within those 3 years, your brain is changing in development. Your brain, the way your brain is changing is that it wants you to leave the nest. That's why teenagers are more rebellious, because their brain, as part of just our human evolution, is trying to get you prepared to going out on your own. So when you tell a kid, when you're an adult telling a kid not to do something, their instant reaction is that they want to do it. But when you tell a kid that the adults actually want you to smoke, they're actually less likely to smoke. So these are the types of studies, and just so you know, the study that I read about this had absolutely nothing to do with drugs or alcohol. It was just something about brain development for kids. So that's what I'm saying, is that we need to start really taking these different aspects of science and kind of merging them together and saying, okay, well, if we know these studies over here work, how can we make this stop the biggest health crisis that we've ever seen? So that's why I want to kind of bring these things to the table to start educating people to kind of get your wheels turning and start these conversations as well. So let me see, what kind of comment do you guys? So do you find the core root of mental illness, depression, anxiety, and addiction with thoughts of suicide? Sometimes I feel therapy is like a pond and it's nice, calm, and therapy stirs a little muck at the bottom. Yeah, so okay, so and correct me if I'm answering this wrong. Like I'm trying to understand that what you're saying. So, so that nice therapeutic pond that you're talking about, like I often, I often look at how the other therapists do their job. My mom, she's a psychologist. She's a clinical director too, and she does one-on-one therapy sessions. And that calm pond. So sometimes I judge myself because I'm a lot more energetic when I go and I do groups. I'm very passionate about this, and it's very hard for me to tune that down. Um, but I've realized just kind of develop my own style. But when I do mindfulness lessons, when I'm doing meditation lessons and things like that, uh, I can switch gears pretty quick and calm down to my sultry, deep, very white voice if I have to. Now with that muck at the bottom. So here's the thing: therapy, mindfulness, meditation, all this stuff. It is going to bring the muck from the bottom up to the surface, but then we get cleansed. Um, this is extremely important. Like something that something that a lot of people do that they don't realize that they're doing, and this isn't just people who struggle with mental illness or addiction, is that they stuff feelings, emotions, and memories down. And some of you might have experience with this where you lie to yourself so much that you believe your lie. And one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves is, I don't care. That doesn't bother me. I'm over it. I'm okay now. That happened to me when I was younger. It's whatever. But what that does is it festers right underneath the surface for all those years. And without you realizing it, there's a great book out there. It's by Daniel Siegel and somebody else called Parenting from the Inside Out. So there's a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is responsible for storing your memories. Hi, Ashley. So the hippocampus stores your memories. Well, those memories are locked in there. They're just in this vault. So whether you're conscious of it or not, there are things as an adult that are triggering you without you even noticing it. That is why we need to bring certain things to the surface. We need to bring that muck up from the bottom so we can work through it and learn to heal from it. And a lot of that comes from a form of meditation called loving kindness, where we learn how to forgive people or we learn how to forgive ourselves and things like that. Like one of the issues that I see, because I follow a lot of news about 12-step programs and doctors or scientists who don't believe in them and stuff like that. And one of the issues that they talk about is, you know, this personal inventory that you have to do. But if you look at any evidence-based form of therapy, they are going to have you talk about these stuff. All of these things that come up. So I'm very fortunate that I found meditation long after I worked through a lot of stuff from my past. You know, growing up with an alcoholic mom, bouncing back and forth between houses, and you know whatever. Like I was able to work through a lot of that by the time I had 3 years sober before I found meditation. That's where meditation kind of becomes a a weird slope. Like I highly suggest if you're watching this and you're not meditating, you're messing up. You're messing up big time, and I can get more into that if you'd like. But there's stories and there's experiences where somebody meditates and they'll be in their practice, and all of a sudden they just get hit with these intense emotions. They'll break down and cry. They'll just maybe a memory pops up, different things like that. And what it is, there's a book called The Science of Enlightenment by a gentleman named Shinzen Young. He's one of the most amazing people on earth, in my opinion. He's a meditation teacher. But anyways, it really clicked for me. What he talked about was like when you meditate, when you have this long-term meditation practice, it's almost like when you soak a dish, right? Like the reason you soak a super dirty dish is because when you let the soap sit in the water, it breaks down these particles and then they can start rising to the surface. That's kind of like what meditation does. Longer and longer term meditation, it starts sinking down into the pores of your subconscious and it starts bringing these things up to the surface. But it brings them up to the surface in a way where we can work with them. So hopefully what happens is that by the time that actually happens to you in your practice, or one of the reasons why you do get a therapist is that you have somebody to guide you through it, or if you're in meditation, you have a lot of tools to work on those things. Once that muck from that pond comes up to the surface. So I hope that makes sense. So some of you who have been watching this for a minute, like this is the other reason why I need a YouTube channel. I'm very long-winded. So when I do these YouTube videos and people, they're upset that I didn't go over all the, all the information, or they think that I'm ignorant, or they think I'm stupid and I don't know and trust me, don't get me wrong, I don't know everything. I'm far from knowing it, but I go out and I do the research on a regular basis. But anyways, the reason I'm moving this over to YouTube is so I can be long-winded. I can give you detailed information. And YouTube, the platform, just allows me to do that. So, sorry, I was looking at my notes. Uh, So, one of the things that come up in topics is that there's certain areas, like I just realized there's more than one area in Ohio where they're talking about not giving drug addicts Narcan anymore. There's one place where it's 3 strikes. So, like, that's some serious stuff. Like, strike 3, you die. You see what I'm saying? And, like, that's brutal. And that's why we need to start working together to stop the problem before it starts. So something that we need to start educating people about more and more and more is that most heroin addicts do not start as heroin addicts. Now, there are some interesting statistics out there where when you see in very specific cities or even counties that people are going straight to heroin, right? But a lot of people, they start off with alcohol, they start off with pills, and then they progress to heroin. So when I see that these like cities and these counties are turning people away from Narcan, I can't help but, not only be a little bit frustrated with that, but also ask them, like, what were you doing to prevent these people from getting to that point where they need Narcan? Well, and it's not just, trust me, it's not just heroin that's making people overdose either, but a lot of the times it is because, there was somebody in the comments who was asking me about, to talk about fentanyl. Like, for those of you who don't know what fentanyl is, I believe, 100 times, I think it's 100 times more potent than heroin, and a lot of heroin is getting cut with fentanyl. Now, we have another issue with something called carfentanil, which is even stronger than fentanyl. Like, I saw a comparison of how much you would need of each, and like carfentanil was literally just like this little speck. It was like a grain of sand. Like, that's all they need. So, I I definitely can. Akron, the home of AA, but I can definitely relate to that feeling that you have. Is they don't care, and some people will never care. Hopefully, eventually, people do care. And that's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I encourage everybody to, subscribe to my YouTube channel where I'm going to do more news-like topics and stuff like that, or I'm going to educate people and just keep sharing them because, I know that we're never going to convince everybody. I know we're never going to educate everybody and, all those things, but even if, like, my theory is, I do groups at a rehab, and my rehab is huge. Our inpatient has, I think, about between 140 and 150 beds. Our outpatient, we have anywhere at any given time from 30 to 60 clients. And I have to go into every single one of those groups with this mentality. And it's like, if one person leaves this group having a better understanding of their disease, I did my job. If just one person. So when it can get frustrating, but when I make these videos, like the other video that I made that a lot of you met me through, Um, let's see where it's at now. It is at it's at over 500,000 views. 500,000 views. So to me, like I'm a guy, I'm a man of numbers. So out of 500,000 views, there's probably 75% of those people who think I'm an idiot. Those are the people who are saying, it's not a disease, it's a choice. Getting all crazy on me, right? Or nobody's born with an addiction. No, I didn't watch your video about genetics. All those angry people, I guarantee 75% of those views are that. Maybe 20% are the people who agree with me, right? And it might be closer to 50-50, but I'm trying to be generous towards the pessimism. But anyways, you got 75% of people who think I'm a moron, 20% of the people who understand that addiction is a disease and they agree with me. That leaves 5% left. Maybe that 5%, they were on the fence. They didn't know. So maybe I was able to educate 5% of 500,000 people who watched that video. And like to me, like that's how I get over that frustration, Ashley. That's how I do it. I try not to micro focus on that one or two or even a dozen people who think I'm dumb or I'm wrong or I'm an idiot or whatever. I focus on that small portion of people who do want to learn. They do want to get educated, because it's even more powerful when I'm able to educate people who are not addicted to drugs or have never had a problem. When I can educate those people, that's even better, because they are the majority. So me educating one person who doesn't struggle with mental illness or addiction, they're much more likely to have the ability to help a bunch of other people. See, a lot of us is that we're in a bubble, right? We're in a bubble where everybody we know, like I work in a rehab. Everybody who comes there, they have to listen to me. But if I can start educating the masses about this thing, like it's so much better, because then they tell somebody. Now the conversation gets going. Now it's not as taboo anymore. Now people aren't nervous to talk about it. And can you elaborate on what's the cure? What's the cure for what? For addiction or for lack of education? Stigmas are rampant, and so many are angry about the drug overdoses that it is very hard. Oh, okay, now I can read these. Drug overdoses that they are saying, let them die. We advocate education and awareness, and we are angry also as we need help to save lives. So, yes, you're absolutely right. Like, they're getting angry. They're getting angry. And here's the thing. If somebody hasn't been directly hurt by an addict, they have somebody in their life, maybe a child, maybe a family member, maybe a friend who had some kind of terminal illness like cancer, and maybe they passed away from it. So it makes them angry. It makes them angry because maybe they weren't able to get enough resources. Maybe they were limited on the amount of treatment. And I get that. I get that, and I empathize with it. It's, part of what I do and part of my mindfulness practice, and I mentioned this in one of my other videos, is that I try to show loving and kindness to everybody out there. When somebody comes at it, all those angry comments, like I've had people like ask me, like, how do you stay calm through those angry comments? Because I know that person has probably been hurt in some way, shape, or form. So one of the arguments that's been popping up left and right, well, it's really just over on one side, but people keep saying, like, how about you try going into a cancer ward and telling these people with cancer that your addiction is a disease? Like, that's completely insane. Like, nobody does that. No, it reminds me of like the 1950s, like turf wars or something like that. Like, people are just like snapping, and they're doing like that thing, like West Side Story, and they're all gonna meet up and argue about whose disease is worse. That's not what happens in the real world. Like, me being able to get sober and overcome my depression and anxiety, it makes me much more compassionate towards other people. I almost guarantee if you took a dozen addicts into a cancer ward with a dozen people going through chemo, you would hear some of the most loving and kind conversations on earth. You would see two groups of people who are just fighting to stay alive. That's what we're doing. Those are the most compassionate people. The ones who I believe are angry are the ones who haven't gone through it themselves. And trust me, like I don't have any kind of statistic on that. But the anger really needs to stop because it's really not helping anything. Here's the way that I look at it. And trust me, everything I say is not an original idea. I just get educated, and then a lot of it I form opinions, or I agree with other people. So what I'll say is this, and here's where I got it from. Because this guy kind of put into words what I was thinking. But anyways, and don't get lost in the story. Try to understand the message of what I'm about to share. When fast food employees were trying to get higher minimum wage, right? There were people coming at these fast food employees left and right and saying, you think that you deserve to make more than an EMT? You think you deserve to make more than this person? You think you deserve to make more than that person? And I'm like, what? Like, that's not what they're saying at all. But this one guy, he made a post, and he was actually an EMT or a firefighter. Some of you might have seen this. It was viral a couple of years ago. But he said, and this is what I'm getting at, he said something to the effect of, you know, people are so busy arguing for the last piece of pie that nobody's asking the question of why the pie isn't bigger in the first place. And that's exactly what they want us to do, right? They want us to argue back and forth about, you know, one of the arguments out there is, how come Narcan's free, but I have to pay all this money for an EpiPen? So they get mad at the drug addict because they got to pay for an EpiPen. Well, check this out. If they start charging for Narcan, they're also going to charge for the EpiPen. So both of us are screwed. So what they need to do is we need to join forces and turn to the people who make the decisions and say, this is the problem. There's a lot of sickness out there, whether it's mental or whether it's physical, and we all need a piece of that pie. That way we're not fighting with each other, right? Like, you know, my drugs of choice are alcohol, opiates. Those are my primary two drugs of choice. But I'm not going to go over to a meth addict and argue with him about how worse my disease or how much better it is. Like, dude, you're trying to get well, I'm trying to get well. Let's work together on this thing. You know, that's one of the reasons why I'm starting this YouTube channel too, because I'm going to be talking a lot more about anxiety, depression, PTSD, and stuff like that. Because right now, you have anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar disorder, all these mental illnesses over here, and a lot of places are talking about, they're kind of talking about it now, just kind of talking about it, and then over here, you have addiction. Well, addiction is a mental illness. A lot of people have co-occurring disorders. For those of you who saw my vocabulary lesson the other day, I talked about co-occur. A lot of people have co-occurring disorders. So we can't talk about mental illness and not talk about addiction. We can't talk about addiction and not talk about mental illness. These websites, one of them I'm doing a guest post for, and you guys can help me out. Maybe go like tweet at them or something like that. I'm writing a guest article for The Mighty. Now, the guest article I have coming up is about social anxiety. But The Mighty doesn't have a section for addiction. We need to start looping that in, because if we start separating ourselves and say, okay, I need the drug addicts over there, I need the people with depression over there, I need the people with anxiety over here. If you have PTSD, you go over there, schizophrenia over there, you know, every different disorder, and we all split up. We're all standing in different corners. Imagine how much more powerful we would be if we all came together and we all just realized, like, we're all dealing with the same problem. Like, trust me, when they're talking about getting rid of mental health care, like, that doesn't just affect the drug addicts. That doesn't just affect the people with depression. It doesn't just affect the people with anxiety. It affects all of us. So since it affects all of us should be joining forces and working together. So that's kind of my spiel about that, and that's why I want to, with my YouTube channel, I'm going to be talking a lot about these, the news and all these other things that are going on. So hold on, and I'm hoping I'm not missing any questions. I have an honest question, not so much about addiction, but the aftermath. Ooh, that's a good topic. What is a good career path for a recovering addict that has a bad record? I was thinking drug and alcohol counseling. Is that possible? Yes and no. So now, just to let you know, that's probably like if you have a bad record, that's probably the best career path. Like just like I work at a drug and alcohol facility. Now I'm fortunate enough to have never had like any charges during my addiction, but like literally the only requirement for the position I have at a huge rehab was 2 years sober. That was it. I'm very fortunate with that because they weren't looking for a college degree or anything like that, which I didn't have and I'm still working on. But yes, a drug and alcohol, like getting into that field, they're gonna have a lot more empathy towards it. Depending on, and don't quote me on that. I think it's really going to depend on the place. It's going to depend on the state, and it's going to depend on how bad this offense was. Okay, so don't get me wrong on that. Um, the next thing is too is that I've met a lot of people who were like that. They actually had these bad things on their record. So when you say is that possible, like absolutely. And something that what a good friend of mine always says when I have him come speak in my rehab, and he tells people to stay clean. He says we need more of you on our team, and like he talks about out of more as, in a sense as we need more people in recovery just out there. But when I hear that, we need more people in the field. Um, I love the people I work with. I work with some of the smartest men and women, some of the best therapists, some of the best clinical directors. But I happen to work at a treatment center where there's a small portion of us who actually went through it ourselves. And something that most of you realize that when you have gone through an addiction, you connect with people on a different level. So I absolutely encourage it. Now, something I also tell my clients too is that early in recovery, get that thought out of your mind. Just get it completely out of your mind. Like if you want to help out other addicts and alcoholics, go help out other addicts and alcoholics. But people get it in their mind like the only way I can help other addicts and alcoholics or people with even mental illness is if I get a job in it right away. Like, absolutely not. I was helping out addicts and alcoholics years before I even got this job. And I never even thought I was going to work in this field, so imagine that. So, yeah, so depending on your clean time and stuff, but I absolutely encourage, like, getting in this field. We need more people who practice, different types of ways to help people get through different mental illnesses, and addiction's one of the biggest ones. Thank you so much for your video. The Not a Disease video just broke my heart. My son left me. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, and that's part of that aftermath too. And you're welcome. And I saw it, and absolutely. Sorry, I'm scrolling through the comments to make sure I didn't miss any. Oh, is there a cure for the disease of addiction? No. So something that I talk about, and this is something that I do. I don't know how to Facebook Live. If I was on YouTube right now, I can do it. And I actually, just let you know, this video was supposed to be in another room where I have a whiteboard and I was going to draw stuff. But I can't do that right now. So just kind of use your imagination. By the way, so anybody who's watching this video, like right now, if you're here with me, like there was a bunch of comments like, oh, this guy's only doing it because it's lucrative for him. Like I'm not sitting in like one of those like YouTube star mansions in Los Angeles. I just do this because I do this. I want to get the message out there. Anyways, is there a cure for addiction? So something I try to teach people is that addiction is not a problem with a substance. That's just not what it is. When it comes to the science of it, addiction is a problem with dopamine. So what happens is that you have your limbic system. So if you're watching this, I'm gonna do something with you. You'll see it in my video if you take my course. By the way, if you're sitting here watching this and you didn't get this before, go to the rewiredsoul.com, go to the Understanding the Disease of Addiction course, and put in the coupon code It's Free, all capital letters, ITSFREE. It's free. You'll get the course for free. Boom. You're welcome. But anyway, something I teach about in that course is that we have a problem with dopamine flow. So, you might feel stupid, but put your hand up like this, okay? This is a hand model of the brain, and it kind of helps you visualize what I'm talking about. So, this would be your spine. This would be your brainstem, okay? If you fold your thumb over, this is the amygdala, okay? That's the fight, flight, or freeze response. This part is the hippocampus, the part I was talking about earlier that stores memories. Back here is the rest of the limbic system, okay? The limbic system, it all kind of works together, and that's where we get our dopamine flow from. Now, if you fold your fingers over, your front two fingernails, that would be your prefrontal cortex. So this is a pretty accurate depiction of what your brain looks like, okay? So you can put your hand down now, all right? I just want you to kind of visualize this. So when we talk about the cure for addiction, this is what's very important to understand. What science has found, so in my original video, when you saw the two different brain scans, is that when addicts, when people have the disease of addiction, whether it's from being born with it or whether it's from when it develops later, what happens is that the limbic system shoots off a flood of dopamine, a flood. So I imagine that this is kind of like, the way I envision it is like it's a dam. So it releases the dopamine. What that does is that dopamine flows up to the prefrontal cortex, okay? This part of our brain right here. This part of the brain is the newest part of the brain. This part of the brain does not fully develop in women until I believe about 26 or 27 years old. In men, it fully develops at about the age of 33 years old. So what happens is that the dopamine flies up, sends a signal to the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex says, yeah, man, that's cool. It's nice to feel good, but drugs are bad, so we should probably stop. Sends the signal back. The dam closes. You go about your day. Now, in addiction, that flood happens. That gate is broken. So the prefrontal cortex gets flooded with dopamine. The limbic system outvotes the prefrontal cortex. That's why they call the limbic system the go system and the prefrontal cortex the stop system. So when you ask if there's a cure for addiction, I say no, because they haven't found a way to fix that dam, to fix that excess flood of dopamine. So those who have an addiction, they have a problem with that flood. That is why you see many people get sober and develop a new addiction, because they still have that excess flood of dopamine. So that's why I say the substance is not the problem. The way our brains flood with dopamine, that is the problem. But when we talk about the cure of addiction, here's what I want to make very clear. And go take my course, because I explain this in depth. Through different practices, one of them is just staying sober, you can strengthen the prefrontal cortex. But I make this very clear with my clients. This does not cure, it doesn't fix that dam, but it starts fixing all the other responsibilities of the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex, I've mentioned already in this video, is responsible for logical decision making, it's responsible for empathy, it's responsible for fear modulation, it's responsible for attunement. Attunement is how we feel connected to others. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for self-awareness. That is why so many addicts are in denial. They don't see what's actually wrong with themselves. That's why so many addicts are in denial after they get sober too. So although we can strengthen our prefrontal cortex, we can't fix that dam. So there's no cure right now. Maybe in the future there will be, but as of right now, there's not. And here's the thing. I just celebrated 5 years sober. Even if they found a cure for addiction, I still wouldn't drink or use. My life is so amazing now. Every single reason that I drank or used, I don't need it anymore. It doesn't solve any, it's not one of those things. Like, I did it because of my social anxiety. Like, I've overcome my social anxiety. I did it because of my depression. I am one of the happiest guys that I know. You know what I mean? So even if they found a cure, I'm so grateful that I've come to a place where even if they developed a cure, I wouldn't take it. And some of the stuff that I'm talking about too, like if you haven't yet, go to my website, therewiredsoul.com, and wait a minute, like not a minute, wait like 15 seconds. I forgot how I designed it. It'll pop up. You put in your name and an email. It'll send you a copy of my book. So those of you who haven't checked out my book yet, have any of you checked out my book? Post it in the comments. But anyways, in my book, I share my story, my childhood growing up with an alcoholic mom, and then a good portion of that book is the solution, is everything that I did to not only get and stay clean, but it's also a lot of the little things that I did, these little very tiny changes that I made that I was using to start restructuring my brain, rewiring my brain, if you will. And so there's a lot of stuff in there. And then the last kind of third of the book, I dedicated to mindfulness because mindfulness is scientifically proven to strengthen the prefrontal cortex. So all of you who are with me right now, by the way, like aside from the free coupon code I gave you and told you to go check out my free book, and just so you know, like don't wait, don't sleep on getting my free book. Like I'm not like selling it for $1 million. It's a short book, but I'm going to California for about a week. My dad's getting out of the hospital. He just had some crazy like open heart surgery, so I'm going to go help him with rehabilitation. But while I'm out there, I'm going to be working on my next book, and that's going to be the free book. The other one's going only on Amazon. It's only $3 on there, so like if you sleep on this free opportunity, like don't worry. But all of you who are there watching with me, like do me a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't yet. I had to switch over to Facebook because I was having a lot of technical difficulties, but I promise that will not happen again. You got my word for it. Okay, so let me see. So first off, like everybody who's been posting like sobriety dates and clean time, like congratulations, like that's huge. I always talk about how my sponsor, he asked me like why do we clap when somebody even gets a 20 has 24 hours clean, and it's because I know that even if you stay clean for a day, like that is a miracle. So all of you, that's amazing. So I'm just checking real quick. I'm gonna be on for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes. I'm gonna just check and see what other kind of questions there are. I think I'm in the same spot. Anger is a poison. Yes, one of my favorite sayings is that resentments are like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. And when people kept saying that to me, it started making a lot more sense. So those of you who haven't read my book yet, like I was a very angry person most of my life. So um, it took me a long time to get where I'm at today. I have clients ask me like, "Why are you always in a good mood? How do you do it?" I'm like, "Trust me, it took me a little while to get where I'm at. It took a lot of work. Like being angry is freaking exhausting. Like if any of you have angry issues, like dang, it is exhausting being that mad all the time. Like now, I just like, oh, I'm so relaxed. So let me see. United can make a difference. Okay, cool, cool. 18 days, yeah. Any advice for mindfulness? Yes! Oh my god! I just came across a mindfulness day. Like, you'll see that. Like, I'm like Pee Wee Herman, like, where the secret word of the day is, like, mindfulness. It's just like, oh! Right? Okay. So, a beginner's way for mindfulness. Take my course. Take my course. So, like, if you're looking at this, whether it's for mental health or uh, addiction, like, check out my course. And the reason I say this, okay, now listen very carefully, everybody. So I'm like wondering because I've given a bunch of people free codes, like why people don't take my course. Like, like you have a free code, take it. Like it's broken down into like 10 or maybe 20-minute sections, so you can literally watch one of the videos, leave, go do whatever you want to do, come back and do whatever. Like just start watching it. But it's very important that you go through the course because I transition like I move the course through a process where you understand why, like why you're doing mindfulness. Like those of you who have followed my videos, like I am all about science. Okay, like it is scientifically proven that mindfulness helps strengthen the prefrontal cortex. So when you go through my course, I have 3 free mindfulness practices. They're in MP3 form, so you can download those to your phone. And I have 3 different ones. I don't even remember the ones I did in there, but they're very simple practices. So as you start to progress further on, you can start trying out other practices as well. So I'll make you a deal. If you go through my course and download those 3 things, then I will give you some even more resources. Because one of the things is that I personally, from my experience, I overindulged in it and I got far too much information and I read too many books and downloaded too many apps and it threw me off my game. So I designed this course specifically to be a good introduction to it, and then you can deepen your practice. But in actuality, with the 3 meditations, the mindfulness meditations I give you from at the end of my course, just those 3 alone in a rotation or whatever you want, like you should be doing those for at least 3-4 weeks before you try to move on to anything else. I just signed up for it, haven't read it yet. Oh, okay, you'll like it. So how do you feel about maintenance drugs like subs or methadone? What time is it? Okay, I'll try to answer a few more questions, okay? If you like this video, do me a favor, like it, share it, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I am more than happy to do these all the times. And any questions that I don't get to, you're giving me topics for other videos, so never stop asking questions. Like, you're helping me and you're helping everybody else by asking questions about mental illness and addiction. Because if I don't know the answer, it gives me motivation to go read about it, to go read new studies about it, to go buy books about it, and then I can relay that proper information to you. So comment no matter what, even if I get to your questions or not, comment below so I can start racking up these questions, so I can start answering them and providing you with more content, so we can start sharing this stuff and getting rid of the stigma. So, Suboxone and methadone. Here's my deal. Okay, Suboxone, at the treatment center I'm working at, I think it's the best way. We do a pretty fast taper. It is about a week. You get tapered off of Suboxone in a week. Now, Suboxone causes withdrawal symptoms. That's a fact. I did a cold turkey opiate detox. Don't recommend doing that. But two of my friends, two of my best friends to this day, they were on these super long Suboxone tapers. So they developed such a high dependence for it that they had a lot of withdrawal for it. So withdrawal is one of the leading causes for relapse. So I don't recommend long-term Suboxone tapers. I think that Suboxone should be tapered off within 1 or 2 weeks maximum. That's my feeling on that. Methadone. This is something I can go deep into, so I'll try to speed it up. Methadone should also be short-term. Methadone clinics, depending on where you're from, like if you have methadone clinics in your city and you're familiar with them, like post about it in the comments below, because I like learning more about this stuff. But there's two different types of methadone clinics to my understanding. One, where they're just giving it to you so you don't do heroin anymore, or pills, or whatever you're doing. They just give it to you. The other ones, the requirement for getting methadone is that you go through their treatment program. Those are the ones that I agree with, because I try to help people have better lives. I don't try to help people get off drugs. I don't try to help people manage their depression or anxiety. I try to help people. My one goal, my one focus is for people to have better lives. When you replace heroin, or you replace pills, or you replace whatever with methadone and just say, here, take this instead and leave me alone, most of those people are still going to have a miserable life, because they never got down to those root issues of why they're so depressed, why they're so angry at the world, why they're so anxious. You're just throwing something else at them. And a lot of those people still suffer from depression. So if the methadone clinic provides therapy and they want to eventually get the person off of methadone, I agree with that. The other ones where it's just like, hey, come down at 4 or 5 in the morning, take your dose and get out of here, I don't like those. But from a standpoint of the country and the benefits, I get it. Like, it's one of those things where it sucks, but I get it. Cities that have implemented those free methadone clinics have seen drastic decreases in the spread of infectious diseases, because people aren't running around sharing needles. They see a drop in crime rates, because when people are getting free methadone, they're not robbing you to get their drugs. And they also see an improvement in the local economy. So, like, and that's just kind of how everything intertwines. If you have less, like, diseases running around, it doesn't hurt the healthcare or the local hospitals and da-da-da-da-da, and, all that stuff. So, like I said, the methadone clinics that are just handing out doses, I get it, but one of the reasons I'm doing all this awareness and stuff, like all these videos, is so we can work towards the other aspect where if you're going to come get methadone, we're also going to teach you how to overcome your addiction and live a better life. Because that's the goal. If I set my intention to help people have a better life, like, that's fine by me. Like, my life is great. I find meaning and purpose every single day. So that's what I'll always believe in at the end of the day. So one of these questions is, hold on one sec. If the addict is young when they start and don't get into recovery until they're in their 20s, is there a chance that they have caused irreparable damage to the development of the prefrontal cortex? I don't believe so. So think about it like this. Like, when you drink or use drugs for a lot of time, there's a lot of nerve damage that's done. Like alcoholics, they happen to get neuropathy, right? Like, all sorts of things. Like me, I had congestive heart failure. My legs were swelling up and all sorts of stuff. So I don't, I like, don't quote me on this, but nothing I've read has said that any damage to the prefrontal cortex is is like totally like beyond repair. So what I highly suggest is practicing mindfulness and meditation because that is like physical therapy, but for your brain. So I tell all of my clients who are early in recovery, like, practice meditation, practice mindfulness, because you're strengthening that part. Like, I was just talking to one of my friends who's a recovering meth addict, and you can often tell, and this is no disrespect, like, just let you know, but you could tell when you meet somebody who's sober, and you could tell when their drug of choice was like meth or cocaine, because a lot of them, especially with meth, they're still very hyperactive, right? And so I don't think that's irreparable damage. I just think that's still a weakness. Like, if I broke my arm and I never went through physical therapy to strengthen that muscle again, I might have a deformed arm. So that's why people need to work on that and strengthen their prefrontal cortex even more. So I got one. I'll do one more question. So this is an amazing question to end on too. So if you haven't yet, go to the YouTube channel. I'll post the link in here again. Go to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Like, just to let you know, the reason I'm transferring this over to YouTube, in case you missed it, is so I can do longer videos for people who want more information. I want to start like doing news segments. I want to start doing more segments where I can give people advice and tips on how to work with specific problems. I want to do stuff like this where I answer just random questions. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel. One of the things is, and I'm not going to lie to you, I need 100 subscribers before I can change that URL. Like, right now, it's like the Rewire. It's like youtube.com/ like QX971815. Like, just crazy. Like, I want / the Rewire channel because it's easier for people to remember. So I just need 100. A lot of you have helped. I'm already there. But tell your friends. Tell your friends to say, hey, I don't even care if you go watch this guy. Just click the subscribe button. It'll be a personal favorite to me. Anyways, so if I don't get to your questions, leave them below. Leave topics that you want me to talk about. Leave questions about anything that you have. Because this last question I'm going to ask, it's an opinion, not fact, but it's an opinion. But I love answering those too, just to kind of get people's wheels turning. So share this video too, subscribe to the channel, and let's go. Here's the last question. So, is AA archaic, and should it start to implement CBT into its program? So, what I'll tell you is that 12-step program saved my life. Absolutely, they saved my life. I didn't know of any other options at that point. They told me, they said, hey Chris, here's 12-step programs. Hopefully they work, or you're gonna die. And I'm like, well, all right, let's give it a go. But I deal with clients every day who, like, I don't know if you've heard of Smart Recovery. Smart Recovery is a program largely based around CBT. Now, I am one of the most open-minded people that you will ever meet in a treatment center about recovery. I tell my clients this all the time. Like, I just tell them that if it doesn't work something else. Like, just do something else. So implement CBT into its program, like, yes and no. One of the issues, and I want to make this very clear, and I hope I don't step on the toes of any traditions. I don't think this is a public controversy, but there is a lot of what I've found in certain fellowships is this argument that people shouldn't take medications, people shouldn't need therapy, everything should be solved within the realm of the steps, which I greatly agree with, but like I said, I'm a man of science. So to answer your question in short, I don't think that these programs are archaic. That was fun. Are archaic. But I don't think they are archaic. I think that one of the beautiful things about these programs is that they are absolutely timeless. When I first read the literature, it was 80 years after it was written, and I could relate to it perfectly. So I don't think it's archaic. What I do think more people need to do is quit only focusing on one thing in their recovery. I think people need to branch out. I think people need to do 12-step programs and therapy, or they need to do 12-step programs and have a meditation practice. Like me personally, I have a sponsor and I also have a meditation teacher. You know, here's my philosophy about this. I am the type of drug addict where I will try absolutely anything you give me, right? And I always progress. I progressed in my addiction. So for me, my personal philosophy about recovery, and I tell this to my clients, is that I have to progress in my recovery. That means the longer that I stay sober, the more things I need to add to it, because complacency is my worst enemy. So that I hope is the best answer I can give you for that. So I don't think they're archaic, but I do think that people should seek out other things. Now, one of the things that I do want to write a book on eventually is that if you look at different 12-step fellowships and just a lot of the sayings and stuff, the 12-step fellowships were doing CBT before CBT was even a thing. They're doing things. CBT is basic, for those of you who don't know, cognitive behavioral therapy. It is a form of therapy in which they are working with you to not only change your behaviors, but to change your thoughts that precede those behaviors. These are things that happen to you when you work with the right sponsor. Like, I look back at what my sponsor did for me. He might as well have been a CBT therapist. He was very repetitive, and it started changing my brain. It started changing my patterns, and I've never had to go see a therapist to do CBT because this guy was doing it for me for free. So keep that in mind too. Sometimes you really gotta hone in on that. But I do want to write a book about that at some point, as long as I don't get banned from 12-step groups or anything. But I want to write a book to support 12-step programs, because a lot of them are implementing evidence-based treatment methods without anybody even acknowledging it. So I hope that answers your question. Oh wow, there's some good stuff in here. But hey, I need to, and I hope I answered your question. One of the last questions I saw was about CBT, so I hope I answered that. But anyways, like I said, click this link. Just click this link. Give it to all your friends. Tell them, hey, click the subscribe button. Subscribe, just leave it off, just don't even watch this guy if you don't want to, but encourage them to watch, because we're trying to get people who don't care, we're trying to get them to care. But anyways, have them hit the subscribe button, help me out. I'm going to start doing all of my videos on YouTube. Also, everybody who's still with me, go to this link. So I'm giving you my course for free. Usually I charge $25 for it. So this course is free. It's my full course about the disease of addiction. It'll give you a better understanding about how mindfulness works as well, and how it helps with addiction recovery. I truly, 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 truly believe that mindfulness is going to be the next breakthrough when it comes to evidence-based treatments for addiction. So I highly recommend you take my course. It'll make sense. There's a link to the course. Use that coupon code so you get the course for free. And you know what? I'll let you in on a secret too. Share it with your friends. Share that coupon code with your friends. I put it on the website right now. I got about 1,000 of them. So go give this course. If you have friends, if you have family members, if you have people who want to learn about addiction, these are the perfect people to give it to if you have friends or family members. So give them that coupon code, have them check it out, because the more people who understand this thing, the more they're going to spread the correct information. And the more they do that, the more we don't have people running around saying, addiction isn't a disease. So spread that stuff around. So don't forget to share this video and like it, and like the YouTube channel, and all that other stuff I got to throw at you. And just remember, I only do that so we can inform more people. So leave me comments. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, but any topic or any news or anything, any questions you have that you want me to go over, just leave them in comments, and I will find them and I will get to them, and we'll talk about them later. All right, y'all, I'm going to go spend time with the kid. I will see you later.